You know, alternative recipes have been the part of Satisfactory ever since the closed alpha. While some alternative recipes are direct upgrade of standard recipe, there are quite a few that are situational for every unique factory and Satisfactory player. When you are picking an alternative recipe, usually you want to save resources or limit it by local resource nodes. Sometimes it is the power consumption as the main concern, and in other times, well, output ratio and space limitation can be the deciding factor, like if when you are making blueprint factories, for example. To say the least, there are quite a lot of choices, and it have been more than 3 years since we got any major update for alternative recipes in Satisfactory. And with Satisfactory 1.0 release this year, we would get some new things for sure. Only question is, will Satisfactory developers at Coffee Stain Studios just add only new story-related recipes on the basis of some ore? Or maybe they will redo some older recipes and just add way more variation where the game is short on alternative recipes. After all, there are a total of 25 free hard drives for extra alternative recipes in Satisfactory Update 8. Some items miss automation, other items miss alternative recipes, and in some cases the choices are quite lackluster. So today in this video, I want to go over potentially missing alternative recipes at the moment, and I want to speculate over real-life production techniques that are definitely missing in the game as alternative recipes. So without further ado, let's talk about coal and oil. Alright, on the one hand we have petroleum coke as alternative recipe in Satisfactory. It turns oil into very limited type of coal. Although there is opposite real-life process of coal liquefaction into oil products, there is no such thing in Satisfactory at the moment. Coal liquefaction originally was developed at the beginning of the 20th century, and the best known coal liquefaction process is Fischer-Tropsch synthesis. The Fischer-Tropsch process is a collection of chemical reactions that convert mixture of carbon monoxide and hydrogen into liquid hydrocarbons. Coal liquefaction was an integral part of German industry during World War II. And if there's any Hearts of Iron 4 players over here, well, we all know how nice to have some synthetic oil when you have no fleet to defend your oil imports from overseas. Coal liquefaction technologies have steadily improved since the Second World War. The most successful one has been Sasol in South Africa. So, turning coal into oil is rather common occurrence in the real life. Just imagine how many interesting factory sites can be made just with use of coal instead of oil in Satisfactory. Convenient oil production sites would basically double on the map. Then, there is the interesting case of steel production. When it comes to steel beams, steel pipes, and in case industrial beams, they somewhat totally lack any or whatsoever alternative recipes. And maybe coal liquefaction paired with endgame blender technology would be nice alternative for all three product types. Also, add to this possibility to skip production steps for steel ingots, and this becomes rather interesting option for steel production in the late game. And when it comes to coal in the game, well, petroleum coke have rather limited use, and maybe it deserves way more options to be an actual part of the game, but not a single-use gimmick. Next on the list, we have integral part of Satisfactory automation that is totally missing from the game. Inhaler automation is non-existent. Well, unless if you consider use of adjustable range to press spacebar as a proper automation technique. Well, until you realize that you can just tap spacebar for lock instead of actually holding it. Yeah, sort of like that. Every single consumable item in Satisfactory, aside medical inhalers, have some sort of automation. And it feels like Satisfactory 1.0 release deserve to have medical inhalers as automated product. After all, even oddballs like portable miners and polyester fabric got themselves an alternative recipe. Even though there is no automation for those items by default if you do not discover the alternative recipe. I am definitely waiting for medical inhaler automation, so I can justify making one more biomass converter blueprint factory. Alright, next on the list are some items that really need some love in Satisfactory gameplay. While it may look like having no alternative recipe is alright, when it comes to making elaborate blueprint factories, having alternatives is always nice. So, some items just miss alternative recipes whatsoever. AI limiter is one of those items. Also, there is the interesting case of high-speed connectors. There are only 2 recipes, and it is always quite weird to decide to use one or another. Both are quite equal options, and with the same machine doing production, you usually decide on the basis of available resources, not on the basis of high-speed connector alternative recipe stats. Then, there is an interesting notion when it comes to production of circuitry and computers in Satisfactory. In real life, All major electronic components are done on so-called wafer base. The round shape characteristics of these wafers comes from single-use crystal ingots, usually produced using the Czochralski method. Wafers are formed of highly pure, nearly defect-free single crystalline material. Then they are cleaned with weak acids, and then there are several standard cleaning procedures with water, more of like pure water or distilled water, to make sure that the surface of silicon wafer contains no contamination. Safe to say that pure drinking fresh water is the major component in the production of anything electronic chip related in the real life. So much so that any major drought can result in significant production loss when it comes to wafer production in the world-leading factories like TSMC. But in Satisfactory, we have production of electronics that do not require any water. Well, like magic. Unless if you are using pure quartz alternative recipe for some reason, yes, you do not need water to produce any electronic item in Satisfactory. As you can guess, maybe implementing some sort of like water-based alternative recipe for AI limiters or high-speed connectors and even computers can be an interesting choice. Well, the choice that is more tied to real-life electronics than to, well, magical Satisfactory. And in general, I think there is not so much choice for crystal oscillator production among many other electronic items in Satisfactory. So yeah, there are at least 4 or maybe 5 items that can benefit greatly from water-based alternative recipe in Satisfactory 1.0. Next, we have several other oddballs in alternative recipe layouts. First, we totally lack third recipe for stator production. We have 3 recipes for motor and 3 for rotor production, but only 2 for stators. Sort of weird, especially for mid-game item like stator. Then, there are only 2 copper sheet recipes, which is totally not enough to have proper gameplay variety when producing numerous electronic items. Adjacent copper products have up to 4 recipes, while copper sheet are very limited in that regard. Another interesting but lacking department in Satisfactory is aluminium utilization. And yes, I will say aluminium because, sorry my American friends, but I could not really say aluminum, it's just weird for me. So, while aluminium is heavily used in the endgame, we totally lack such as simple recipes like aluminum canisters, and now I said aluminum man.
Oh boy.
We do not have aluminum canisters and we do not have aluminum screws. So this is like 2 basic items that can be totally made from aluminum. Why they are not made from aluminum? I would be way more happy to use something else than steel screws and steel canisters in my late game factories for once. We sort of have like aluminum fluid tanks for nitric acid and nitrogen gas, but then every other fluid is being handled by normal canisters, which basically divide any common sense by 0. I have no idea what is happening here. So I bet just streamlining canisters into one item produced by multitude of ways including aluminium, well, it makes more sense than having 2 separate types of containers for no reason. And finally, on my short list is the total lack of alternative recipes for production of gas and iodine filters. But this is only an issue for Blueprint Factory enjoyers like me, rather than something that needs an alternative automation for majority of players, I think. So these were the alternative recipes predictions and sort of my personal wishlist for Satisfactory 1.0 release. But I bet as always, Satisfactory developers at Coffee Stain Studios would surprise us with something cool and unexpected. Leave your thoughts and ideas on alternative recipes down below. As always, huge thanks for all YouTube members supporting my channel. Thank you very much for watching, like, share and subscribe. Have a nice one, and Yakis out!